All right, so we are looking at basic exercise science today. This says chapter 2, Harry. Not chapter 2. This is chapter 5. They move all the friggin' chapters around on me every time they come out with a new edition. But we're looking at chapter 5 here of your basic NASM textbook, and it's going to go through. We are spending all of our time on the kinetic chain today. So this is the skeletal system, the nervous system, and the muscular system. So purpose of today's lesson, we want to give you guys a fundamental overview of the structure and function of what we call the kinetic chain, right? That is the human movement system. We want to understand that basic anatomic structure as well as like the physiology of how it actually functions so that we can get a much better understanding of human movement as a whole, right? So objectives tonight, we want you guys to be able to explain your nervous system. We want you to be able to understand the skeletal system, the muscular system, and then we'll briefly, just again at the very end, blast through the endocrine system because it's barely in there. And then we want to talk about what is probably most important, how these systems adapt and how they respond to exercise when we apply that. So when I'm talking about the human movement system, when I'm talking about the kinetic chain, we are describing this as a series of interdependent systems, right? So when I say interdependent, what I mean is like they are working together, right? Like your muscular system is moving your skeletal system, but your muscular system is under the control of your nervous system. So like it's all interlinked. If any of these systems is out of whack, then all of them are out of whack. That's actually why I really like the term kinetic chain. I mean, like human movement system is very descriptive because it's like, oh yeah, it's the system that's responsible for human movement. That's pretty easy to understand. But I really love the term kinetic chain as well, right? Because like you think about like kinetic means movement. It means forces, right? And then a chain is like a bunch of stuff that's linked together. And we all know that phrase, right? You're only as strong as your weakest link. Oh, there's Carlos. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, right? So if any of these are out of whack, if your nervous system is not functioning properly to create a movement the right way, then your muscular system is going to move the wrong way, right? That's what we see in what we call overactive versus underactive muscles. Probably one of the biggest concepts we talk about, right, is this idea that like ideally our muscles should sort of be arranged like this, right? Like in a normal environment, what we should see is like, a muscle on one side of the joint here and another muscle on the other side of the joint right here. And you can see like this joint has exactly the same amount of room to move this way as it does to move this way, right? That's a really good balance. But what we often see instead is an alteration, right? Generally, we tend to see this instead, where, oops, that's actually not how I want to go, where we'll see like one muscle is overactive compared to the other muscle, right? So we'll see on this side, we've got this really like intensely contracted muscle, this kind of, shortened, already bunched up muscle right here. And then we see this long, skinny muscle right here because it's being stretched out, right? No problem, Carlos. Good to see you. And good to see you too, Daryl. So this is what we see. So now there's like a lot of room to move here, but very little room to contract here, right? This is overactivity. So if your nervous system has learned how to use this muscle a lot more than it knows how to use this one, then we're going to be struggling, right? We're gonna be, overactive on one side of the joint. So the nervous system's not functioning properly because we've trained it, right? So if you sit all day, right, like you're in a seated position, right? So you've got, you got a chair here, right? And then you're sitting like this all day, right? These are your quadriceps and your hip flexors here, right? There's the knees and stuff, right? So your quadriceps, which are these muscles that, run around to here, they're in a flexed position, right? Because one of them is this major hip flexor that's in charge of like pulling your knees up towards your chest, for instance, right? So that muscle is just contracted all day. So the more sedentary you are, the more time you spend sitting, the more likely is this muscle is to get tight and overactive. Meanwhile, on the other side of the joint, like your glutes, which are over here, right? They are meanwhile super underactive because their job is to push it this way, right? Their job is to extend the hip, but you're not able to do that, right? you're not extending your hips, you're sitting all day. So what ends up happening is like this muscle tightens up because your nervous system knows how to use that muscle. And this muscle loosens up because it forgets how to use that muscle, right? And that's what we see in this scenario right here. So there we go. Our nervous system is displacing our muscular system. And then what does that do? Well, it moves the kinetic chain some other way, right? So then when we go to stand, those hip flexors don't want to let go, right? So they end up staying tight. And so then a different segment of the skeletal system ends up moving. What ends up happening is, as we go into this standing position, those hip flexor muscles, they pull down, and then like your back arches in response. And it gives us this extra rounded or extra arched low back. And that puts more stress all the way up all of our individual spinal discs, right? We call that an anterior pelvic tilt or lower cross syndrome for those of you guys who know those terms. And so like that is a dysfunctional nervous system affecting the muscular system. And then in turn, that affects the skeletal system. So again, all of them are very interdependently linked, right? So we'll go ahead and start off with the nervous system, looking at its anatomy. We talked about this yesterday, so a lot of this is going to be review. So your nervous system is the NASM definition to it is it's a system containing specialized cells that are responsible for coordinating signals to provide a communication network throughout the body. That sentence right there is the sentence that they like to throw onto your homework and stuff. So it provides a communication network within the body, right? Think about what a communication network is, right? It's information coming in, and that information is being interpreted, and then information's going back out, right? You tell me something, I interpret it, I respond, right? We have a network. Or, you tell me something, I interpret it, and I tell somebody else, and then they interpret it, and then they tell somebody else, right? And so like we are creating a communication network. So we're going to divide this into two primary divisions, just like we saw yesterday. You're going to have your central nervous system. That's going to be your brain and your spinal cord. And then we're going to have your peripheral nervous system, which is communicating with the rest of the body, right? So the central nervous system is responsible for all of the decision making, and the peripheral nervous system is responsible for gathering information so that those decisions can get made, or carrying out the decisions that got made by the central system, right? So your peripheral system is, what's actually going to the arm when your brain, decides to do a bicep curl, right? So it travels down the central system, sends it over to the peripheral system, and then the peripheral system will recruit that muscle that we want to use. So there's our communication network that we're talking about here, right? So if we're looking at the three things that our nervous system does, right? Information going in, interpretation, and information going out, we want to define those very specifically, right? So these are our three primary functions of the nervous system, right? We have sensory function. That's the ability of your nervous system to sense changes. And that sensing changes is both internal and external. Like, remember yesterday we talked about how some of your stuff is autonomic and some of it is somatic. Somatic means that we have control over it. Autonomic is like automatic. It means that we don't have control over it. It just happens without us thinking. Either way, those changes, whether it's conscious or unconscious, voluntary or involuntary, whether or not it takes place because of some type of sensory change, right? So like you go to pick up a 5-pound dumbbell, and then but let's say like we set up like a really good prank in the gym, right? Like what we're going to do is we are going to take like a 60-pound dumbbell or a 100-pound dumbbell, right? We're going to take a 100-pound dumbbell and we're going to fill it with, we're going to take all the weight out of it and just like fill it with empty space. Okay. So now this 100-pound dumbbell still says that it's a 100-pound dumbbell, but it actually weighs 5 pounds. What's going to happen is somebody's going to go to pick that up. They're going to brace their core. They're going to tighten everything. And then they're going to go, they're going to fling it off the ground because they're going to use way too much muscle, expecting this big heavy weight, right? But they're probably not likely to go all the way over and like lose their balance, at least hopefully not, right? Because what'll happen is like you're going to realize pretty quickly that you're not like really attached to that heavy weight anymore. And so then you're sensing information like, oh, it's actually not that heavy. And then you relax, right? You recruit a lot less muscle. And so everything sort of calms down. So that's sensory information. That was you sort of like consciously being like, oh, I don't need that much strength. Let's slow down, right? That's conscious. But also, let's say your heart notices that there's not very much oxygen in your blood and it's becoming very acidic. Well, then your heart rate pace is going to pick up. So that's sensory information. So sensory information is the ability to sense changes in the internal or external environment, right? So for instance, like your sensory receptors in your skin, they sense that you're touching a really sharp object, right? And so like all of a sudden they're experiencing, either pressure in like the fingertip, right? Or, they're experiencing like a tear in the lining of the skin, right? There's little like nerves in there that are like, oh no, we're punctured, So then that information is going to go up to the brain. Okay, so we're going to have our integrative function. So this is the ability of the nervous system to analyze and interpret sensory information, and this allows for the proper decision making. This is where we actually, decide what to do. So like if you go to pick up like a big heavy dumbbell, but it's actually not that big and heavy, right? Then your brain's going to go, oh, hey, we don't need that much muscle. Let's recruit way less. Let's calm down, right? You touch something really sharp, right? Your nervous system is going to go, we should move away from that thing. You see a glass of water, you start feeling thirsty, right? So, sensory information comes in, seeing a glass of water, and then integrative function goes, I should drink that stuff. That's really good for me. Let's go get some of that, right? So that's integrative function, right? It's where we integrate the understanding and interpretation, right? So, we go back to our example here. Sensory receptors sense that you are touching a sharp object. Then the integrative part of the nervous system understands and interprets that sharp object is something to avoid, right? There's actually, and this is just a little bit of a side, a little bit of a side bit here, but it's really interesting with the integrative information. This is kind of where like instinct comes from. We sometimes have these situations where like we just know that we should stay away from something. Like there's a reason human beings are kind of afraid of spiders naturally. Like, I grew up having spiders in the pet store. Like we had like tarantulas for sale and stuff. I know we're weirdos, but so like spiders have never really been like a big thing for me, but I get like, but biologically we're kind of designed to, be a little bit afraid of something like that, because like a lot of times they're very dangerous. There's something that, for a very long time has kind of been ingrained in. So there's a lot of like instinct involved there. There's a really great video if you guys ever want to watch. I'm not going to have us watch this today, but if you ever get a chance, why is stuff creepy? And it's like, it's this video by Vsauce about like why certain things are creepy. Like, look at this freaky friggin' teddy bear. You put teeth on it and suddenly it is not cute anymore. Like why is it that, that is considered like creepy? And it's because of instinct, right? We just know things with that shouldn't have teeth like that. They kind of set us off, So that's a little bit of integrative information as well, right? Your brain's just going, I don't like that, But in the gym, you go to pick up a 5-pound dumbbell. The integrative system is going to say, this is how much muscle we need. You go to pick up a 10-pound dumbbell. It'll say, this is how much muscle we need. 20-pound dumbbell. This is how much muscle, right? We need different amounts of, motor units for different reactions. And then lastly, we've got the motor function, right? This is the neuromuscular response to all that sensory information we got earlier. And it was determined by the integrative function, right? So, motor function is like, okay, well, I decided to move away from that sharp object, right? So now we're going to recruit muscles that are going to draw the hand away from that sharp object, right? So that is overall like motor function. So again, if we sort of look at the human nervous system here, and we look at like the ideas of like integrative versus actually this will work really well. Oh, black background. Can't do that. I need a blank one. There we go. That'll work. Okay, so if we look at this, right, again, we've got sensory information, right? So, right, so sensory information, let's say that happens, we experience that here at the hand, right? So that sensory information is going to travel up, and it's going to go to the nervous system here, and it's going to travel up to the brain. And then in the brain, we're going to experience integrative information, or integrative function, I guess I should say. And so like that'll just kind of happen in the brain there, right? It'll make all this decision making, right? And then we've got motor function, which will come back in the opposite direction, right? So then like motor function is going to go back the other way. So if we look at that here, that's traveling down and recruiting whatever muscles it needs to, right? So we'll go ahead and put an arrow in. Good Lord, put an arrow in these places, and that'll make this make a little bit more sense, right? So sensory information goes towards the brain, and integrative function happens at the brain, and then motor function happens elsewhere. Now, by the way, you can also have integrative function at the spine as well, right? Obviously, in really intense like reflexes, for instance, we can also have integrative function there as well. Well, that's impossible to read. So those are we'll go like this. We'll put this here. Yeah, let's just go like that. So integrative function can happen in both of those places. So those are sort of the three primary functions of our nervous system. That's how that's actually going to operate. So let's talk about one of the biggest concepts that we're going to introduce in this class, proprioception. So this is probably one of the most important topics for us to understand as personal trainers. So everybody, you want to get this word ingrained in your brain. So you want to, and you want to be able to read it, understand it, and just know exactly what we're talking about whenever we see this word. It's a little bit of a weird word, kind of an odd series of sounds all coming together, but we call it proprioception. Okay, proprioception. Proprioception, this word right here, is the body's ability to sense the relative position of adjacent body parts. It's a good definition. It works, I don't think it's sensing the relative position of different body parts, right? Like we need to understand, like if I close my eyes, I still know that my hand is raised at my side here, right? I still know that I'm wiggling my fingers, right? How do I know I'm doing that even though my eyes are closed? Now, obviously, you could just say, that's a really easy answer. You're the one telling your body to do it. Of course, you know it's happening, right? It's not bad. I understand that answer. But here's the thing. How many times have you guys told somebody to do something and then it didn't happen properly, right? I can think of a lot of times, that has happened, right? There's a lot of times where we say to do something, but it doesn't actually happen. So proprioception is both the information going out and the information coming back in. So it's your body's ability to know what position it's in, right? So sometimes you'll hear people say this is the cumulative neural input from all proprioceptors throughout the body. I hate that definition because I think it's almost impossible to read. But basically, proprioception is your body awareness. It's your body's ability to understand its own position, right? It's your body's ability to understand where it is in this world. So here's the thing. We often have altered proprioception. A lot of times our proprioception is kind of messed up, right? Like for instance, for those of you who have been with me for a while, how many times have we gone to do like a calf stretch? And I'm like, hey, keep your toes pointing straight forward. You're gonna stretch one leg here, right? And then what ends up happening is that back leg turns out, it swings out a little bit. And so I'll go around and I'll fix everybody's heels and stuff, and I'll say that's straight, and it feels crooked. But in reality, it's actually straight. That is altered proprioception. Your muscles have gotten so used to being contracted that they're going to send a signal to your brain saying, yeah, no, we can't possibly stretch any further, right? So then your brain's like, well, if I can't possibly stretch any further, then I must be at the max length. And I know that the body was designed this way, so my max length is this. And so it thinks that it's in the right position, but it's not, right? That is altered proprioception. So when we see people with altered posture, like really bad posture, they think they're standing upright, and then all of a sudden you make this adjustment, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm 6 inches taller. That's a lot. Yeah, that's, that is alterations in proprioception, right? So all that information coming in. So we need to know what proprioception is in general. It's our understanding of our body awareness. It's that classic spatial awareness, right? Your understanding of where you are. I always think of like Batman, the dark Batman Begins. Where, let's see if I can find a GIF of that actually. Remember this bit from Batman where like he's telling him always mind your surroundings. He hits him in the legs or whatever. And then has that great callback moment at the end where he kicks him off the train. It's great. It's a great moment, right? That's kind of like proprioception. It's your body's like spatial awareness. I used to have a teacher who kept this like little foam ball on his desk. I told this story actually just a couple weeks ago. Oh, that's awesome. I love that. So I used to have this teacher who would keep this like little foam ball on their desk. And if anybody like fell asleep in class, or if anybody like just wasn't paying attention, this is like kind of pre-cell phones for the most part. But if anybody was like on their phone, he would just randomly be speaking, and he'd be like, oh, blah, 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 and he would go proprioception, and then he would just chuck that ball at whoever it was, and it'd be like, like, and so like anytime you heard the word proprioception in this guy's class, everyone was like, like we'd all look around to be more aware of our surroundings in case there was like a little foam ball flying at our heads. Sounds terrible. He was great. I was actually a big fan. But yeah, so that's kind of what proprioception is, right? So it can improve your balance. The more aware of your body position you are, you're going to have better balance. It improves your coordination. It improves your posture. I'm sure we've all been playing sports at some point, and a ball or something's heading our way, and you reach up to go to grab it, and it hits your hands and just bounces off, or maybe you completely miss it. You just you just have like, you're just like, how did I miss that? Well, proprioception, right? Your coordination was a little bit, you thought you were in the right position to catch this thing, but maybe it didn't track exactly perfectly. So it becomes really important for us to make sure that we're training our clients to improve their proprioception. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we actually improve proprioception? Well, let's look at like what human movement is conceptually, right? Let's look at what it means to have a human body and move it around, right? Movement is a response to sensory information, right? We know that information comes in and then we respond to it by moving in a specific way, right? So this becomes really important for us to improve our proprioception by training in what we call a multi-sensory environment, meaning that we want to make sure that we are training in sort of unstable environments, because the more that we do that, the more information we're getting. And the more information we get, the more our nervous system learns. And the more it learns, the more it knows how to do stuff, right? Just like you, right? Like, this is one of the reasons why we start kids off, like one of the first skills in school is simply like learning the alphabet, right? And learning colors and learning shapes and things like that. Because like this world that we live in is made of different shapes coming together. This language that we all speak is made up of different words, and those words are made up of different letters and sounds, right? And then, we know that colors are also going to kind of make up the different parts of the world, right? So like by learning those things at a really early age, you get this foundational information, and then you can start putting all that information together to interpret stuff, right? So if I'm trying to teach somebody how to do a movement, right? Let's say I want somebody to master, doing like a shoulder press, right? This is great. I mean, they're going to learn how to do it by doing this pressing motion here. But you know what's going to be even better? What if I get them to stand on one leg while they're doing that shoulder press? Well, now they're going to learn how to do it if they happen to tilt over here and like, oh, oh, and they learn how to get themselves back to center, right? And then they start tipping over here, and they learn how to get themselves back to center, right? We put all that together. So when we train in a multi-sensory environment, an unstable environment, we're basically giving our brain more stuff to learn. It learns how to do this. It's learning all of these various angles and how to do a shoulder press from those various angles. This is one of the reasons why we kind of like dumbbells over barbells if we're going for stabilization movements. We like barbells for raw strength, but we like dumbbells for like stabilization movements and proprioception, or kettlebells, unstable stuff. We like barbells and dumbbells and kettlebells over machines in the gym because at least, and cable machines. Cable machines are good. But we like those above regular, just like strength training machines, because strength training machines are, they're on a track, right? So every single repetition is identical from the last one. You're getting one type of information and then that was it, right? That'd be like trying to teach somebody how to speak a language, but then only teaching them one word, it's going to be hard for them to kind of communicate. So that's why we want to train in the way NASM likes to word it. The thing that they always say, they either say multisensory environment, or you'll hear them say, and this is so hard to say, but they'll say proprioceptively, so proprioception, enriched environment, right? And so like that's also a really good term, but it means wobbly. It means unstable, right? We want to build a foundation of stabilization, and then we can work on like that raw strength stuff later. So any questions so far on some of the concepts? Like these are like the mission of our nervous system. Any questions on this so far, guys?
No, it's not pretty straightforward.
All righty.
Yeah, I'm good over here.
Cool. See all the Simpsons thumbs. All right. So let's take a look at neurons again here real quick. We talked about this yesterday, but there is a little review up here. So the neuron is the unit of the nervous system that we're talking about here, right? And it's got all of its normal cell characteristics. It's just like any other animal cell in the body, right? It's going to have a nucleus, mitochondria, all the normal organelles that you're going to see. But then the thing that makes neurons unique is that they are going to have axons and dendrites, right? The axon is the big long tail that makes neurons really good at like reaching from one place to another. So, kind of like a big long wire. And then we've got all the dendrites, which have all these little fingers, and that makes one wire really good at attaching to multiple other wires, right? So again, that's making the network, right? So if we look at sort of like the neurons of the body here, you can see they'll have like multiple connection sites, right? This is a really good one here. You can see like this neuron right here is connected to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other neurons, right? That's a really effective way to be connected. And that way, like what makes a different thought or a different action is simply the order at which those neurons like kind of travel through, right? Like think about like right? Think of it like this way. Let's see here. Let's type in the word proprioception, right? So proprioception, big old long word, right? 14 letters there. But look at this. Look at, if you were just to use the letter P, R, O, we got P again, R again, I, O again, C, E, P, we use all these letters. We put them in whatever order, right? I can make the word proportion, price point, proportion, criterion, ectropia. What the heck does ectropia mean? I know tropic. I don't know most of these words, but like I can make all these other words, right? And so that's kind of how your neurons are, right? It depends on like what order you go through, but that's the difference between sweet and salty, right? If you go from neuron A to B to C to D, that is where something tastes sweet. But if you go A, C, B, D, go in that order. Now something tastes salty. And that's how our thoughts and actions actually work, because you only have you have billions of neurons, but they can make billions upon billions, probably upon trillions, definitely upon trillions of combinations. And that's why we have so many different thoughts, actions, and feelings. So love that communication network stuff that we're seeing here, right? All those dendrites and all those axons, allowing them to sort of travel around the body. So we're going to see 3 types of neurons here, which is kind of funny because this is going to use pretty much the same arrangement that we saw here in our functions, but we've got sensory neurons, right? Sensory neurons are related to sensory function. So we'll just go ahead and put that right here. So sensory neurons, we'll put it in parentheses again. They're responsible for all that information gathering, right? And then you've got motor neurons. Well, that's responsible for motor function. So motor neurons are going to do that. But then you've also got you've got interneurons, which are connecting the two, right? So we'll go ahead and put let's put a third category here. We'll have interneurons, right? And their job is to act as the connection point from one to the other, right? So if we saw a connection point from here to here to here, and then back here to here. Right. So, your sensory neurons are not directly attached to your motor neurons. They have to travel through interneurons first. So you touch something, a sensory neuron attaches to an interneuron, to another one, 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 gets up to the brain interprets that information. It recruits motor neurons. So it goes interneuron, blah, 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 until eventually it gets to the motor neuron to zap the muscle to cause you to do a bicep curl or tricep extension, whatever it happens to be, right? So those are the different types of neurons that we've got. So then if we're looking at how our nervous system is sort of divided, and we look at these different divisions here, we got the central system responsible for making all the decisions. We got the peripheral system responsible for carrying out those decisions or gathering the information before those decisions got made. And then that divides into either somatic or autonomic. Somatic is all the voluntary stuff. That's us deciding to do something. Autonomic is all the involuntary stuff. That's us not necessarily deciding, your brain's deciding, but you're not choosing it, right? So somatic would be your muscles when you are consciously moving, deciding to walk around or run or jump or whatever. And then autonomic would be all the stuff that's very automatic, right? Let's say you need to make some adrenaline to get through a really tough workout, right? Well, recruiting the adrenal glands is part of your autonomic nervous system. Or let's say your heart rate needs to speed up. That's part of your autonomic nervous system. And then we've got either speeding stuff up or slowing stuff down. We got the sympathetic nervous system, which speeds stuff up. That's your fight or flight system. And you get the parasympathetic system, which calms stuff down. So one of the ways that NASM likes to ask questions about this division of the nervous system is they'll make you sort of go through this flow chart in your head. They'll say, the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system is an example of a blank response. And we know that the sympathetic nervous system lives under the autonomic side of the nervous system, right? So you would say this is an autonomic reaction. Or they might say a client's heart rate increasing is a blank reaction. That's an autonomic reaction because you don't have control over your heart rate, right? So that they'll sometimes we gotta remember how we sort of loop those things together. So last thing we'll look at today for the nervous system is our sensory receptors. So we go back to this idea of proprioception, right? How does our body exactly understand all that information about what position it's in, right? Well, lucky for you, you have sensory receptors that live in the body. So there's special structures throughout your body that basically transform the environmental stimuli into information that your nervous system can interpret, right? Their job is to sense stuff. It's the easiest way to think of it, right? So there's all kinds of different ones out there, right? There's nociceptors. Some people have more active nociceptors than others do. Sometimes people who have like a really high pain tolerance, for instance, their nociceptors don't kick on as quickly, right? Nociceptors are really interesting. They only kick on after a certain threshold. So if I start pinching myself, it's not really that big a deal, and then I pinch harder, and it's not that big a deal, and I pinch harder, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, that's starting to hurt, right? And those are where finally we reach a certain threshold, the pain receptors kick on. You got chemoreceptors. Those are probably the most fun because like chemoreceptors are the ones that respond to like smell and taste, right? They sense chemical changes. So like a potato chip hits your tongue, your brain goes, that's salty, right? That's a chemical receptor that did that. Those are your chemoreceptors. Or like something smells really good, right? Those are chemoreceptors. That's why sense and smell and taste are very interlinked. They use the same receptors. And then you got photoreceptors. These are kind of fun. These are the ones in our eyeballs. Photoreceptors are basically looking at different wavelengths of light to tell if something is light or dark or red or blue or green. And it uses any combination of those three. So a lot of different receptors out in the body. The biggest one that we're going to talk about, the biggest category, our favorite, is meccano receptors. Okay, the word meccano, right, coming from like mechanic or physical, right, and it's a receptor. So meccanoreceptors are these sensory receptors that sense physical changes to things, right? So like touching something, that's a mechanical, you would sense that, right? Pressure changes, you would sense that. Whether or not your muscle is accelerating or decelerating, that's a mechanical change, right? Or if something's being stretched out or if there's a lot of tension, those are our meccanoreceptors, okay? So their job is to like feel physical changes. Like gravity pulls a little bit differently when we're leaning like this than it does when we're sitting upright. So there's going to be three major categories that we need to remember. If you forget everything I tell you today, if you wipe everything from your brain, or if you don't pay attention, this is the most important information right here today. I would say that this is probably the key, biggest information for us to understand, because this is how we have proprioception. So everybody strap in. So when we're looking at mechanoreceptors, the three major categories. First one we're going to see is what's called a muscle spindle. Okay, muscle spindles are sensory receptors that run through the length of the muscle, and they are sensitive to rate of length changes and, you know, the fact that length changes are happening. So like, let's say we have a muscle here. I'm gonna try and do my best to draw a muscle, which is always goes poorly. But you know, kind of bulges out in the center, kind of comes back in, flattens out the end, right? So here's our muscle, right? So this right over here, this is our we got the tendon on this end, right? And we've got another tendon on this end. Okay, so that one lives there. And then this is the overall like muscle belly here. Okay, in the center. Okay, so that's our muscle belly. So there we go. Now we've got kind of a working muscle here, right? So what we're going to see is a sensory receptor that runs all the way from one end to the other, right? So we're going to put this little sensory receptor here, running from one end of the muscle to the other. And it doesn't go through the tendon or anything like that. It's just living in this section right here. And what we'll do is we're going to give this like a little coil, because that's kind of what it looks like here. So it kind of coils itself like this. Kind of looks like a spring that runs all the way from one end of the muscle to the other. This is so difficult to draw. I gotta make sure I don't right click by mistake and erase the whole thing, because I'm gonna be real mad if I do that. So you can see it's kind of coiling around this central line there. Okay, so this is the muscle spindle. Okay, so what a muscle spindle does is it is sensing the length of the muscle, right? So like if this coil is like really stretched out, right? Like imagine the coil looks like this. That's really stretched out versus if it looked like this. Right? Now it's like you can see the loops are a lot bigger because it's like closer together. Like this is much longer than this, right? That is how your muscle spindles operate. And so their job is to tell your brain how long your muscle is at any given time. Okay? Here's the problem. Muscle, and remember this, everybody remember this. Muscle spindles are dirty, filthy liars. They are absolutely liars. They will tell your nervous system, no, I'm at full length right now. I couldn't possibly stretch any further. And yet, all of a sudden, we're doing a stretch of some type. And then we hold it for about 30 seconds. And all of a sudden, we're like, well, I'm getting more range of motion, right? We're stretching ourselves out. We're like, oh, God, I can't go any further, right? And that's the muscle spindle going, no, don't stretch any further. And all of a sudden, we hold it for a little while. And we're like, we get all this extra range of motion, right? And it's like, okay, so clearly you were lying, right? Like, this is kind of like my mom and my dad. Bear with me on this, right? My mom is very good at hoarding away money. She's a very, very talented saver. And so my dad and her will be out somewhere. They'll be walking around like a park, or something like that, and going to like a farmer's market. And my dad will see something that he wants, and he's like, "Ooh, I want to get that." And he's like, "Do you have any money?" He checks his wallet. It says cash only, and he doesn't have any cash on him or something. And he's like, look at my mom. He's like, "Do you have any money?" And she's like, "No." And he's like, "Well, all right, I guess I don't need it." And then like they'll move on. And like later, she'll just whip out $100 bill that she's got like squirreled away. Like happened. I watched that happen my whole life. And so like that's kind of like muscle spindles. Like, no, we don't have any room to stretch any further. That's what an overactive muscle actually is. An overactive muscle is where you have a very overactive muscle spindle. So this happens because if you contract your muscles and you leave them contracted for most of the day, right? Imagine just wearing a shoe with a heel, right? Let me see if I can find just like a picture of that as a visual reference. Not high-heeled shoe. Well, okay, that's not really working very well. I'm not finding what I want. So imagine if you're just wearing a shoe with a heel, right? Like a big old honking heel, like we generally tend to see. I mean, like, we wear, if you work in a job where you have to wear dress shoes, a lot of dress shoes, they just have this big honking heel on the end of them, right? And so what ends up happening with that, I mean, you can see here, right? The problem with that, there we go, there's a big old heel, right? We started making a lot of shoes like this. And the idea was like, okay, well, we'll put more padding on the heel because that's the first thing that contacts when you walk, right? And so then we're reducing impact, right? But the problem is that it ends up putting your foot a little bit in plantar flexion, right? Remember what plantar flexion is. That's pointing your toe away, right? So this is plantar flexion. So if you imagine, the difference between like, I can do, I'll make my own diagram. We'll do this. But imagine like, somebody who's in a shoe that looks like this, right? With this big old honking heel here. Right? That's putting them in plantar flexion all day, right? Versus somebody who might be in a shoe that's a little bit more level and then not so much, right? So one of the questions that we ask our clients when we're doing a fitness assessment is like, hey, do you wear shoes with an elevated heel? Now, this is pretty extreme. This is like actually like a high-heeled shoe, but even like, let's just look at let's look at like men and women's like dress shoes, right? Take a look. Look at this big freaking heel. We see it. It's just part of like fashion, and it's ruining us. It's constantly putting us in plantar flexion all day. So what ends up happening is this little muscle spindle says, oh, I can just live at this length. I don't have to be stretched out, right? And so it gets used to being in this position. So then all of a sudden one day you try to stretch your leg out and you go like this, and the muscle spindle goes, whoa, 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 what are you doing, right? And it gets very freaked out. It kind of panics. And that's that tightness that you're feeling. This is what goofs up our posture. This is what alters our proprioception. And this is what, is one of the reasons why like people move improperly. It causes aches and pains. And so your nervous system, which is the muscle spindle, by the way, I know it lives in our muscular system, but it's part of our nervous system, is dysfunctional. So then it tells the muscle, hey, you can't contract, you can't stretch out any further. You're going to tear in half. So the muscle goes, oh, and so it contracts back in response, stays overactive, right? Stays contracted. So now all of a sudden you're trying to do a movement, but your muscle's not letting go, and you need that full range of motion. So what ends up happening? A different part of your body, some other muscle, gives in and it stretches out instead, right? So, you're trying to, let's say you're trying to like squat down, right? And then all of a sudden, your muscles say, hey, we can't stretch any further. So it tucks your butt under, right? You still get a little bit lower, kind of hurt. But you're not actually moving the way you're supposed to. So now your skeletal system is experiencing stress that it shouldn't have experienced. That's what muscle spindles are, right? They're sensory receptors that run through the length of the muscle. They sense the length of the muscle change, and they also sense the rate of that length change. So if you do also like move really fast, it will trigger the muscle spindle to freak out a little bit. Then we have one other material here in our muscles that is going to be our what are called Golgi tendon organs. Okay, so Golgi tendon organs, they are connected to the muscle spindle, and they're kind of like a little bit of a webbing. They kind of thread themselves through the tendon like this, right? So they're kind of like these little, like almost like a little spider web here. So they kind of web themselves through. So that is a Golgi tendon organ, or a GTO, if you want to call it that, right? So a Golgi tendon organ, now that is responsible for sensing tension changes within the tendon. Okay, so Golgi tendon organ, tendon tension, right? Like it's a good way to remember it. So they're sensitive to changes in that tension. If the Golgi tendon organ thinks that you are going to tear off of a bone, because that's the thing, right? We would have a bone on either side here, right? That this muscle is like connected to. So little bone here, right? Like running this way. So if the Golgi tendon organ thinks that there's a really high amount of tension and that the tendon is going to lose its grip and like peel off of that bone, it's going to create like a pain signal to get you to stop stretching. Okay, so that is also a protective mechanism. And by the way, muscle spindles, even though being the filthy liars that they are, they're a protective mechanism. They're that tension, that pain that you feel when you're stretching out, that is important because like the muscle spindle and the Golgi tendon organ are constantly working together to say like, hey, don't stretch too far. You're going to rip us in half, right? So the Golgi tendon organ is sensing if you are about to lose your grip on the bone, and then that muscle is going to get pulled or teared or torn or something like that, right? So they're sensitive to those tension changes. Now, that's really important because like that's also giving us the ability to understand like what position we are in space, right? Like if I gave you all the instructions, right? Here's my favorite, and this is a weird analogy, but stick with me. My favorite analogy. I'm going to give you a box, okay? And you can't see through that box. It's totally sealed on all sides, but it's got a couple air holes, and I tell you that in that box there is an animal, and you need to tell me what animal it is. I'm quizzing you and asking you what animal is in the box, and you get 5 hints. Okay. Well, you're probably, so the first hint is I say, okay, well, this is an animal with feathers. So immediately you're like, all right, You eliminate all the animals out there in the world with scales. You eliminate all the animals out there with fur, right? And you're left with nothing but animals that have like feathers, right? And then you're like, okay, great. And then I tell you that this animal also has wings. And you're like, okay, so you eliminate any animal that doesn't have wings. And then I said, okay, this animal has webbed feet. That's pretty good, right? That eliminates a lot of animals. You're left with like what? Ducks and geese, right? And then I say this is an animal that quacks. You're like, great, got it. It's a duck, right? Like you put it all together and you're like, I got it. I know what animal's in the box, right? It's a duck, right? Because geese honk, right? I guess. Part of my expertise. So you took all these pieces of information, right? You took this piece of information, that piece of information, that piece of information, and you interpreted it all, and you figured out what's in the box, right? That's what happens in your muscles. That's what gives you proprioception. So if I told you that the biceps muscle is at 100% of its max length, and it is at, a relatively good amount of tension, well, I don't have to look at my bicep to know that this is the position that my bicep is in, because this is like its minimal length. It's fully contracted here. This is its maximal length, right? As I can try to like go beyond that maximal length and really like stretch it out even further. But that's where I start to feel a little bit of that extra tension, right? And so like, if I do that, I know that I'm probably pulling on some other part of my bone and pulling it further. So my brain is going, okay, I'm getting a signal from the bicep that says, hey, brain, I'm the bicep. We are currently at max length. My brain knows that my arm is straight. But if I got a signal from my brain or from my muscle saying, hey, we're at 50% max length, well, that's halfway between here, which is 0% max length, and 100% max length. That'd be right about here, right? Maybe right about here, I guess. So that is how your brain uses the information from a muscle spindle and the information from a Golgi tendon organ to understand what position the body is in. And unfortunately, because both of these things tend to get overactive, the Golgi tendon organs tend to get overly sensitive, or the muscle spindle especially tends to get overly sensitive. It tells your brain, hey, whoa, we are at full length right now. Like imagine if I got a signal from my bicep saying, hey, we're at full length right now. What would happen? Like I'm not at full length, but my muscle's telling my brain that it is. So what am I going to feel? It's going to feel like there's a lot. If I try to stretch my arm any further, I'm going to go, oh, right? It's going to create a pain signal because my brain's trying to protect the bicep from tearing in half. So if the muscle spindle is lying, it's altering my proprioception. So then I go to try to straighten my arm and I'm like, well, can't straighten my arm. So what do? I move some other part of my body in response to try to get the job done. And that's why people's knees cave in when they squat. That's why people's low backs round or their low backs arch. That's why people lean excessively forward when they're squatting. That's why we have an asymmetric weight shift. It's why our arms fall forward when we're trying to do certain movements. Why we raise our shoulders up like this when we're trying to do other movements, right? It's why our head cranes forward. All of these like alterations in posture that we generally tend to see, they all come from a place of altered proprioception. When we screw up our proprioception, we don't, keep these muscle spindles healthy and these Golgi tendon organs moving the way that they're supposed to, our brain gets bad information. So then it carries on, it uses that information to make decisions. But those are wrong decisions, right? So we end up moving the wrong way. And then there's one more that we didn't talk about today, because we tend to skip through these pretty quickly. But joint receptors. Joint receptors live in your skeletal system. They're part of your nervous system, but they live in the skeletal system. Their job is to sense whether there's like pressure or acceleration or deceleration inside of your joint. So like, you look at a joint cavity in the knee, right? You can see like all that empty space in there. There would be like receptors that live in there sensing whether or not the bone is moving. And that way your brain knows what position your bones are in. So Does that make sense to everybody? Are we pretty good at understanding this idea of proprioception, right? The idea that like your muscle spindles, your Golgi tendon organs, all of that is telling your brain what position it's in, and it gets altered, you know, it gets messed up. Pretty good on that? So this is probably, like I said, this is the most important concept of the day.
Yeah, pretty straightforward, pretty easy.
Cool. Love that. All right, a lot of thumbs up. You guys are on point today with making me aware. You know, speaking of proprioception, like I got a lot of information coming in, which makes me feel good. All right, so next bit, just looking, I think our last nervous system slide here. So here's the fun thing. Early improvements in exercise often come simply because your nervous system gets better at coordinating the body. It starts to realize, I think the deltoid has been lying to me because I can move through this range of motion. It was telling me that I could only go to here. You know, I've got all this, right? And so your brain gets better at that really quickly as soon as you start exercising, which is why like your weights in the gym, they go up really rapidly because you start moving a little bit better and more efficiently and stuff. And it's great, you know, your clients will make a lot of progress really early on, simply because all this stuff is new and the body is like adapting to it very quickly. Doesn't mean you're necessarily gaining a massive amount of muscle, unfortunately. Like if your goal is to look good at the beach, size takes a lot longer, but strength comes pretty quick actually, because a lot of times strength is determined by how efficient your nervous system is. So next thing we're looking at is the skeletal system. You guys will remember this from the other day. So skeletal system is the is the framework of the body. So the framework of the body, right? This is giving us like a structure. It's providing a resting ground for our muscles to live, but then it's also giving our muscles something to manipulate. Right. So your bones are coming together to form junctions that we call joints. Sometimes you will hear the word articulation, where one bone is articulating with another one. But yeah, it's just another fancy word for joint. So the bones are acting as levers, and that gives your muscular system to move around, right? So when we're looking at this, we'll have two primary divisions. We'll have the axial skeleton, that's your skull, your rib cage, and all of your vertebrae. Your axial skeleton protects all of your most delicate structures. It protects your spinal column, it protects your brain, and it protects most of your vital organs. And then you have your appendicular skeleton. Those are your appendages that move you around this world, right? Your arms, your legs. So your bones are constantly remodeling themselves, right? We are constantly breaking down bone tissue and then building that bone tissue back up. So whenever we're exercising, right? Like let's say I'm doing a shoulder press, right? This deltoid muscle is experiencing, you know, a flex, or this deltoid muscle is pulling like this on my humerus, which is this bone that runs through my arm, right? But the humerus, look, the deltoid only inserts like right about here. All of the rest of this length, right? It's just experiencing gravity. I got a weight in my hand over here. So it's flexing, it's bending every time I do a repetition, right? If I was doing a pull down, right, I'd be pulling from down here on this part, you know, and that's inserting on the bone even nearer. So again, it's creating like a bending. So the bones are just constantly flexing back and forth like this. So what that does is it creates little micro fractures. Which sounds terrible. You're like, wait. Every time I exercise, I'm fracturing my bones. Yeah, I used to get to do this in class. My favorite thing to do was to go up to a student. I'd be like, all right, up top. And I'd give him a high five. I'd be like, all right, we just fractured some of the bones in our hands, right? Like tiny ones, little microscopic fractures. You know, there's nothing like, I'm not really breaking somebody's bones, but like these microscopic little fractures. So what happens is now, I've got little tiny imperfections in my bones, right? And so what's going to happen is my bone remodeling process is going to take place. My body's going to come along and fix all that. But what's really cool about when your body fixes something is it never fixes it back to the way it was before. It always makes it a little bit stronger and a little bit more resistant to damage in the future. If you ever look at like the bone density of MMA fighters, you will find like their shin bone density is higher than the average person. If you ever look at the bone density of rugby players, you'll find that the bone density in their shoulders are higher than the average person because they do that with, it's called the scrum, and they line their shoulders up and they press into each other, right? Football players who exercise regularly, basketball players who, jump all day long, creating that high amount of impact. Baseball players who are sprinting in certain ways, right? Like athletes are going to have very naturally high bone density, especially the ones who are experiencing like, impact sports. So it actually, they will have higher bone density as long as their repair is greater than their damage. Obviously, you can also decrease bone density if you're not getting enough calcium or vitamin D. If you're not giving yourself the fuel necessary to build it back up, that can actually decrease your bone density. But in general, exercise improves bone density, right? And it's because of this bone modeling process. So the two cells that are responsible for that are your osteoclasts. Those are your bone breaker downers, and your osteoblasts. Those are your bone builder uppers. So whenever we damage our skeletal system, the osteoclasts come along and they eat away any of those imperfections, and then they blow up. Actually, they go through, it's called apoptosis. They go, they pop, and so like all the calcium that they ate gets released into the area there, and then afterwards the osteoblasts come along and they spit up this collagen material that attracts calcium. So then all that material comes along. Meanwhile, osteoblasts also pick up some extra calcium from, your digestion and stuff. So that's actually why we're adding calcium the more often we do this. It gets denser and denser and denser the more we exercise. So when we're kids, our bone makers are super, super active. And when we're seniors, unfortunately, our bone breakers are actually more active. And that's frustrating, but that's sort of how that works. Now, there are various categories of bones throughout the body. We talked about this the other day, but we're going to, this is kind of funny, but they're just named after how they look. You have got long bones. Guess what? They're long. That's their defining characteristic, right? So long bones are longer. So for the record, like your fingers, for instance, are actually like, like this is a long bone. Obviously, it's not as long as like my forearm or my femur, right? But it is longer than it is anything else, right? So long bone, long bone, long bone. This one's shorter than this one, but still a long bone, So as long as it's longer than it is anything else, it's a long bone. We got short bones. Short bones are kind of cubical in shape. Like this one, it doesn't look too much like a square, but it's kind of similar, right? If they are similar in length and width, we call that a short bone. We got flat bones, which are very flat. They tend to be very thin and very protective. And then we got my favorite category at the very end, and it's like scientists just ran out of names for stuff. We got irregular bones, which are all the funky looking ones. So like your spinal processes, for instance, your spinal discs are irregular bones, all the weirdly shaped stuff is what we consider to be irregular bones. So when we're looking at bones, all of our bones are going to have these interesting markings on them, right? You're going to have two major categories. You're either going to have flattened portions of bones, which we call a depression, or you are going to have, bumps on your bones, which we call a process. So you either have depressions or processes, and that is what allows muscles to get a really good grip. So for instance, if you look at your scapula, which is that shoulder bone, right? See this like valley right here? Actually, let's see if I can get a lateral view. There we go. Other side lateral view. Top view. So this is kind of what that scapula actually looks like if you're looking down on it from the top. Look at this huge valley right here, right? So that's a depression, right? A depression is a big old dent in the bone. And that allows our what's called supraspinatus muscle to live on top. It lives superior to the rest, right? Like all the other muscles live underneath. This one, this green one here, lives on top. So it runs underneath this little arch right here. And so it's able to get a really good grip because of this like little valleys shape there, right? So depressions are like little dents on your bones that allow muscles, well, the tendons of your muscles to get a really good grip. You'll also see processes. Processes are like little projections from your bones, right? So for instance, if you look at your condyles here in your femur, they're little dents, right? They're like these big old dents here. That allows the cartilage here to get a really good grip, right? Or you'll see like what's called a trochanter. That's another one, right? So a trochanter is a dent in the or a projection from the bone, right? So you can see here this knob, like there's the head of your ball and socket joint there, right? Like that sits into your pelvis. And then look at this big old dent right here. That's called the greater trochanter of your femur. And you can see it is where muscles can run from here and get a really good grip on that bone. And that way they don't rip off the bone very, very easily, right? So those are our general bone markings. And those bone markings are what allow, like I said, our muscles to get a really good grip. Most of the ones that we talk about, we usually end up spending most of our time looking at processes, like the projections from our bones, but like there's plenty of dents on there as well, you know, tubercles and things like that. So looking at your vertebrae, probably some of the most important bones in your body, you can see they're just full of freaking projections. I mean, look at all those like processes running out from your spine. But we're also going to divide your vertebrae into different sections. You're going to have your cervical vertebrae, that's your neck. And so there are 7 bones there. You have the top one, that's your C1, C2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then you've got your thoracic vertebrae. Your thoracic section is basically your upper body. And so that is your T for thoracic, 1 through 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then you've got your lumbar vertebrae. Whenever you see a chair that has lumbar support, right, it means that it's the curved section. And so that is sort of pushing, allowing you to kind of keep that lumbar curve. So there's 5 of those, 5 lumbar vertebrae, L1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then you've got your sacrum at the end. Now, your sacrum, we have our S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. They used to be separate bones, but as we get older, they fuse together into one large bone. So we just call it the sacrum, but it does technically have 5 sections to it. This is one of the weird reasons, like fun party fact for people, it's like babies have more bones than adults do. That's part of it, right? Those bones slowly fuse together as we get older. So yeah, you get 206 bones in your body now. I think babies have like 230 or something like that. So yeah, like that's the sacrum there. And then at the very end, we got our coccyx, COCCYX, coccyx. That is our tailbone. That is the remainder of our, it's the remainder of this. It's what's left. There you go. So that's our tailbone there. We don't really have tails anymore, although sometimes you will see every now and then a person will be born with what's called they call it a vestigial tail. Vestigial is basically an anatomy word that means unneeded. And every now and then a human being will be born with a vestigial tail. And it's where they just got a couple extra vertebrae at the bottom, and it looks like a little short, kind of like a bulldog's tail. And it's like, ooh, really freaky looking, but But yeah, so that is those are the sections of our vertebrae there, right? So that's a brief rundown on bones, right? We got long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. The most famous irregular bones are going to be your vertebrae. And you've got your cervical vertebrae in the neck, thoracic vertebrae in the upper back, lumbar vertebrae in the lower back, sacrum, which is attaching your two pelvic bones together and giving that sort of a triangle that holds the two together. And then coccyx is your tailbone. This doesn't really do much, but don't bruise it. That'll ruin your day. So then if we are looking at where our bones are coming together, remember we called those an articulation, right? Where one bone is interacting with another, we call that a joint. Okay, so the structure where two bones come together is referred to as our joint. And then there is this term here that I absolutely freaking hate, which is Arthro Kinematics. So the word arthro comes from the word that means joint, I think in Latin, and then kinematic comes from the word that means motion, which is joint motion. But we don't need this word because there are more letters in this word than there are in its definition. Joint motion. I hate this word. But yeah, that's what Arthro Kinematics. So we basically have three major types of joint motion. We have the rolling action, where one bone is rolling over another. We've got sliding actions, where one bone is sliding over another. And we've got a spinning action, where one bone is spinning about another, right? Those are the three major categories of movements that we are going to see there. Now, in terms of like those movements, those are the movements that we see in our what we call synovial joints. Synovial joints, if you remember, are our fully movable joints. They're the ones that have a joint cavity. They're probably what you're thinking of when you think of a bone joint, right? Because like that is 80% of the joints in your body are synovial, and then like they're the ones that are responsible for movement. So when one bone moves against another, yeah, it's like, okay, well, we think of that as a joint. So if we look at a synovial joint, right? Well, if we look at a non-synovial joint first, non-synovial joints are the ones that don't have a joint cavity. They don't really move much, right? So like, for instance, your rib cage, right? That's a non-synovial joint. There's not a joint cavity between this cartilage that we see here and the actual bone itself. We don't want a lot of movement in our ribs. We just want our ribs to stay where they are. Remember, this is protecting all of our vital organs, right? The sutures of the skull, you know, we don't want a lot of movement in the sutures of our, in the sutures of our skull, right? We want those plates to stay exactly where they are, right? So those are our non-synovial joints. Synovial joints are the ones that fully move, right? So if we look at synovial joints, they have a cavity between them. They have empty space between one bone and the other. And then usually there are some special materials that you're going to find in there that you don't normally see in the non-synovial joint. So for instance, synovial fluid is kind of kept in that little membrane there. So this little membrane kind of surrounds the joint. And then there's synovial fluid in there. By the way, when you do that and you crack your knuckles and stuff, you are basically releasing that fluid from that cavity, and it's rushing against your skin or against the bone and makes that big loud popping sound. Not a big deal. But that is your synovial fluid. And it's there to act as like a lubricant. You know, we don't want a lot of friction rubbing on our bones. And then you'll see sometimes other specialized materials in there as well. So for instance, if you look at the, well, let's look at the knee joint. You look at the knee joint, you'll also see some other specialized materials. Oh, good Lord, why are we not not showing me everything here. There we go. So you'll see sometimes like you've got these little fluid filled sacs. That's called a bursa. Bursa are just basically like little fluid sacs that keep muscles from rubbing too hard against the bone. And then we got a fat pad in there that's there to prevent friction, right? But probably the most important thing that we see in synovial joints that we don't see elsewhere are our ligaments. So our joint connective tissue, right, is providing stability so that these bones can stay connected. So that's actually what a ligament is, right? So ligaments, so let's just go ligaments. Ligaments are what attach one bone to another. So here's like our femur, for instance, right here, and then there's our pelvis right there. So you can see there's a whole bunch of different ligaments that are there holding this whole area together so that this bone does not become detached from this bone. And we need those ligaments to provide us with that stability, right? Look at how many ligaments we can see here. We need that stability from the ligament because synovial joints are really mobile, which is great, like because of our synovial joints, it allows us to manipulate our bones. It allows us to create human movement, right? But the problem is when we look at these ligaments, right? Or I'm sorry, the problem is with having a lot of space between the bones, with all that increased mobility comes a lot of decreased stability. So like when you hear about like a dislocation, or when you hear about like a subplexion, which is kind of the same thing, of like a joint, you are basically seeing where like the bone, let's say like my bone's sitting like this, and then I move it over here. It's like, now they're no longer connected. It's like, oh God, I dislocated my shoulder, right? That often happens in like ball and socket joints. Ball and socket joint, most mobile joint in your body. It's amazing how much range of motion it has. But because of all that range of motion, it's very unstable. So when you look at your shoulder joint, you'll notice it is covered in ligaments, right? There are just a ton. Look at that. Like there's ligaments just surrounding the whole thing. It's kind of like duct tape, like if you put a whole bunch of duct tape around it, duct tape still stretches and flexes and stuff, but at least it like keeps it all connected, right? If I had two segments of wood and I just duct tape, I'd be able to move that wood around, but like at least it wouldn't become completely detached from one another. Now the problem, and by the way, I have a love-hate relationship with this picture that I'm showing right now. This picture is going to come back later in the PowerPoint. The problem with studying ligaments, a lot of new students run into this. Don't make this mistake. Ligaments are attaching bones to bones. So your femur being attached to your fibula right here, this bone attached to this bone, that's a ligament. And we draw them the exact same way that we draw tendons. See, this is a muscle attached to a bone. That's a tendon. So tendons are at the end of your muscles. Ligaments are like, if you got a bone here, I can't draw bones, so I just draw them like this. Right. So ligaments are what attach like one bone to another. So if I created like an ACL ligament here, there's the anterior one, right? And if I create a PCL ligament here, there's the posterior one. It's going to run behind. Create the LCL over here. That's the lateral side. And then the MCL over here. That's the medial side, right? Those four ligaments are the ligaments that we find in the knee. And that's going to hold those two segments of bone together. Now, they look just like tendons whenever we're drawing. And the reason why is we want to draw them that way. We draw them that way specifically because that is sort of just like showing, it's kind of highlighting the fact that if you look at this, ligaments, like look at how much blood the muscles get. That's why they're stained red, by the way. Like your tissue, if you drain your muscle of like all blood, it ends up kind of looking the same color as like your skin, or kind of looks the same color as like looks like sort of the same color as like your ligaments and stuff, right? It's just kind of this colorless thing, but if you were to fill it with blood, it stains it bright red, and that's why our muscles actually kind of are that color. Ligaments, they tend to, we draw them as like white, and the ligaments we draw as white and tendons we draw as white, because that's sort of our way of showing that like they don't get a lot of blood flow, which is also why these are generally where we have the most problems. You know, they look at how long it takes you to come back from like a really sore workout. Like you work out really, really, really hard, you know, doesn't take you that long to repair, maybe a week later and you're feeling great, you know. You create a lot of damage in that muscle and you're good to go already, you know. But look at how long it takes to recover from like a sprained ankle. The reason why is because like there's just not as many nutrients getting to the ligaments in your ankle. So it takes a lot longer to repair. Think about how long it takes to get tendonitis to go away, or a torn muscle, which usually a torn muscle is actually a torn tendon. How long does that take to repair? It takes a long time because it's not getting a lot of blood flow. So due to that lack of blood flow, that's one of the reasons why those tissues just take a lot longer to repair. It's also why it's really important to not overtrain. When you start overtraining, you start to feel joint pain, right? More so than you feel like your muscles will just be the same level of sore, but you start to feel like aches and pains in your elbows and your knees and places like that. That's a sign of overtraining because those areas are not repairing as quickly as your muscles are. Yeah, I believe it. I believe you. That's also like one of the reasons why like steroids are so dangerous. So here's the thing, guys. Steroids, you'll hear people say this, and this is technically untrue, but you'll hear people say that steroids strengthen your muscles, but they don't strengthen your connective tissue. And same thing with growth hormone. They'll say like growth hormone strengthens your muscles, but not your connective tissue. That's not strictly true. Now, this is not me saying that's okay to take steroids. That's not 100% true, though. The reality is those areas get stronger faster than your ligaments. Your ligaments will get stronger on steroids. Your tendons will get stronger on steroids, but they are getting way less blood flow. So your muscles get, we'll say 500% stronger. That's an exaggeration, but we'll say that. And your ligament only, or your tendon only gets 100% stronger. So then all of a sudden you're lifting this big heavy weight with a really strong muscle and you've got a tendon that can no longer keep up. And that's like where you'll see people like, you know, experience like a biceps tendon tear, which is one of the most horrifying things to watch. Never look up that video. Or a pectoralis major tear. You know, they'll tear a muscle and then basically that muscle will detach because it's no longer attached to the bone and it just like rolls up the body. Horrifyingly. And then you gotta, you know, go get surgery to get it reattached. But yeah, don't take steroids. So yeah, so those are our joint connective tissue, right? Those are our ligaments, right? Special structures that attach one bone to another. They are characterized by poor vascularity. They do not get a lot of blood flow, therefore they repair much more quickly. So that is the skeletal system in a nutshell. You guys know the drill. Questions, comments, concerns? How y'all feeling? Anything from anybody? Gerald's feeling good.
All good over here. Right.
Yeah, feeling good.
Cool, cool. All right, guys. Let's take a look at the muscular system. Whoop. Awesome, love it. Okay, so the muscular system, everybody's favorite. Right? Mine doesn't look like the picture. So our muscular system is, you know, we're going to describe this as a series of muscles, and those muscles' job is to generate internal tension. Remember, we talked about all the different proteins that live within our muscles, right? And so those proteins bind together to create internal tension and pull the cells inward and shorten them, right? And what that does is that internal tension overcomes external forces by manipulating our skeletal system. So if I've got a 10-pound dumbbell in my hand and I generate 11 pounds of tension in my shoulder, I can raise that against gravity. Right? But if I generate 9 pounds of tension in the shoulder, gravity is going to win and lower the arm, right? And that's how our muscular system operates, right? It's a series of these muscles generating a certain amount of tension to move things around. So as we're looking at our muscles, right, we know that it's a compilation of all of these different fibers all coming together in bundles, right? So your overall muscle is a bundle of fascicles, right? If we look at, I'm gonna find a picture of muscle bundling. I never Googled that separately. I have such a good picture I saw the other day. Where was that? There was such a cool darn photo. Whatever. That's kind of works, I guess. So you can kind of see here, there's the overall like body of the muscle, right? And it's just a bundle. Like, look, that's a fascicle there, and there's a fascicle there, and a fascicle there, right? Each of those individual fascicles is a bundle of individual muscle fibers. So if you were to zoom in on this fascicle here, what you would see is a whole bunch of individual little muscle fibers, right? So if we zoom in, speaking of zooming in, that is a low quality picture. Depixelate. There we go. So we can see all of these like fascicles here, right? And if we were to pull one of those fascicles out, you can see there's an individual muscle cell. There's another individual muscle cell. There's another one, right? A whole bunch of individual muscle cells, right? So if you take a whole bunch of muscle cells, we call those muscle fibers. You wrap them together in a bundle. We call that a fascicle. And we're going to put a little bit of connective tissue around that. We're going to call that the paramecium. Then we're going to put a whole bunch of fascicles together, and we're going to bundle those together. We're going to have a connective tissue around that that we're going to call the epimecium. And then we're going to surround that, all of those fascicles together with the overall muscle, and we're going to cover that in fascia, right? So all of that will go to the very end before it inserts onto a bone, and you will notice that that is where our tendon comes in. So the tendon is basically this collagen mixture that kind of threads itself through all the muscle fibers and holds them together, and then threads into all the little holes in the bone, those little porous little holes that we've got in the bone, in order to create a connection, right? So now the muscle is attached to the bone thanks to our tendon. But again, we draw it in a white color because that shows that it doesn't get a lot of blood flow. It doesn't get stained red because it is not getting as much nutrient delivery. It's not getting as many as much blood flow, and that lack of blood flow is what is resulting in it being a different color there. So as we're looking at them, so now we got to kind of take a look at our the tendon, by the way, muscle, tendon, bone. So then we've got our individual muscle fibers to look at, right? So if we pull this fascicle out and we see that it's a whole bunch of muscle cells, we pull that muscle cell out, you'll notice, zooming in here, right? This is the individual muscle cell right here. And then inside are these, like, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 little rods. Those little rods are, actually 8 rods, I kind of wrong. Those little rods are running from one end of the muscle to the other. Those rods are called myofibrils. And your myofibrils have little proteins that live on them that create the actual contraction within the muscle, right? So when you're looking at it, you can see there's the overall myofibril, right? It's this big long rod. And then there's this area where these little proteins on that rod are overlapping with one another. We see this thick protein in the middle, and we see these little thin proteins straddling it, right? So what'll happen is, okay, that'll work, I guess. So what'll happen is basically we are going to try to take this area here, which we call a sarcomere, right? So that's one of our terms, right? So the myofibril is the overall rod, and it's made up of like all these sarcomeres stacked end to end to end to end, and that's what makes up the myofibril. So the sarcomere is the area where these little proteins are going to overlap. You've got actin right here. That's the thin filament, right? So that's actin. Good Lord. That is massive. That's the thin filament, right? And then you've got myosin here in the middle. That's the thick filament. Right? So those are our actin and myosin filaments. And basically what's going to happen is it's going to contract and try to pull towards the center this way and try to pull towards the center this way. And so these little filaments are going to slide across one another, right? So basically, if you were to sort of take this separately, see if I can actually pull this. I don't know if this is going to work or not. Take this separately, and we'll go ahead and rotate this just like this, right? If I take this and just slide it over here, and I take this one and I slide it over here towards the center, this is what's actually taking place during a muscle contraction, right? So I'm basically sliding these little proteins, right? We slide this one this way, we slide this one this way, and now the whole thing shortened, right? It got a little bit closer together and it slid from one end to the other, right? And this would, this kind of got detached here, but yeah, that's not going to work. Yeah, I can't fix that, but you can see I slid the proteins in like this. So they basically overlapped one another and they kind of shortened, right? That's what we see. So if we look at like, you know, this shortening action, we know that it pulls towards the center. So if we look at a sarcomere at different lengths, this is kind of what it looks like. This is a very kind of weirdly drawn version, but like there, look at how much space there is. Actually, there's not that much space. Sorry, this is the contracted muscle fiber here, right? On top, you can see there's a little bit of space, right? But this is mostly contracted. There's not a lot of space in between the middle here, right? This is almost fully contracted over here. But then over here now, there's a big old gap. And then there's room between these two proteins. There's plenty of room to slide. So this is a contracted sarcomere, and this is a relaxed sarcomere. And so that's how your muscles are actually going to do all of that magic of contraction, right? So the sarcomere is where the actin and the myosin live. So actin has all these little binding sites that myosin is going to reach up and grab, right? And so it reaches up and grabs and pulls it kind of hand over fist until it slides towards that. Meanwhile, this one over here is pulling this way. So they're both sliding across one another together. Now, obviously, we need to be able to relax our muscles as well. And so troponin and tropomyosin are the little protein blockers. Their job is to go in the cover up the actin strand so that myosin can't reach up and grab it, right? So as we look at like actin and myosin, you know, if we see like the way this contraction works, you can see the little myosin heads here in the center are reaching up and grabbing the actin, and they're sliding it towards their center. So if this happens here and it happens in the next one and the next one, the whole myofibril, the whole rod gets shorter. And if all the rods get shorter at the same time, the entire muscle cell shortens. And if a whole bunch of muscle cells all shorten at the same time, well, then the entire muscle is going to get short. And that's how we bunch up our muscles to create contractions, right? Now there is like a little area you can see. One of the things that we haven't really talked too much about is you'll actually notice, let me sort of undo some of the work I did here. if you actually look at the way a myofibril is arranged, it actually looks kind of like this. So now I just need to be perfect about how to copy and paste this. There we go. So it actually kind of straddles itself like this. Do you guys see how like I didn't actually line these up perfectly? This one is sort of lined up, kind of like bricks, right? Like you line it up halfway. And what that does, you'll notice this creates a little zigzag action. And because of that zigzag, we actually call this a Z line. So the area between this Z line and this Z line, that actually defines like where your sarcomere is. So this area is the sarcomere, and then this one is a different sarcomere. And that just gives it a little bit of structural integrity, you know, by straddling them off slightly. It's just, it ensures that like this whole area is not going to tear. But you can see that right there, actually. See how like this actin strand is offset compared to this one and this one? That's the zigzag that we're seeing there. So that's the Z line. The Z line is the area between two sarcomeres, making this zigzag pattern. So as we're creating muscle contractions, right? If we're looking at the way this like contraction works, we need troponin and tropomyosin to get out of the way, right? Like troponin and tropomyosin are blocking the binding sites, which means we can't create a contraction. So how do we actually move that out of the way? Well, that's where the nervous system comes in. The nervous system is going to create what we call neural activation. And that's how the nervous system is going to recruit your muscular system, right? So it does this through a series of motor units, right? So if you had, let's see here, muscle. If you had a muscle, oh, that's not going to work. I always forget, that's like my favorite picture, but like I can't use it whenever I'm copying and pasting. So if you have an individual muscle fiber here, right? This is, again, like there's all kinds of muscle fibers in this fascicle, right? This is one of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So if you had like a neuron, right? We'll draw a little neuron over here with its little, spiky hair and dendrites, right? And then we'll give it a big long tail. Right? And let's say it's interacting, right? It branches down and there's a fiber that goes to this one and that one and that one and that one. Right? All these little fingers here are interacting with every one of these fibers, right? That is what we call a motor unit. So a motor unit is one neuron and all of the fibers that it's interacting with. So if it, contracts with every single one of these little muscle fibers, right? Interacts with all of them, right? Let's say it just reaches out, kind of like this. That's a motor unit, right? So it's got every one of those sort of firing all at once. And if it does it in like thousands of muscle fibers, you get a strong contraction. And if it does it in only like 100 muscle fibers, you get a weak contraction. And if you do it in 10 muscle fibers, you get a really small muscle contraction, like, the movement of your eyeballs or something, right? So that's where the nervous system is interacting with our muscular system. So going back to all of the whole process that we talked about, an electric impulse is going to travel down from neuron to neuron to neuron to neuron to neuron until eventually that electric impulse reaches the actual muscle fiber itself. So it will release a neurotransmitter. We call that neurotransmitter acetylcholine, and it will bind to the muscle cell itself. And when that binds to the muscle cell, that triggers the release of all of those chemicals. That's the neuron interacting with the muscle fiber. So what does it do? It causes the muscle fiber to go from a lengthened position to bunch up and become a shortened position. You can see, right? Notice how like the sarcomere here in both examples, right? All these little blue lines are a lot closer together in this picture over here than they are over here, right? There's a little gap. There's a very small gap, right? So that's a contracted muscle fiber and that's a lengthened muscle fiber. So that's the sliding filament theory, right? So how does it happen? Well, again, A nerve impulse releases the acetylcholine. It binds to the muscle cell. The muscle cell flushes all of its stored calcium into the sarcomere, and all of that stored calcium fills the sarcomere, and calcium is what moves the proteins that are regulating the contraction. The troponin and the tropomyosin, they move out of the way. They get out of the way of the binding sites, and now myosin grabs the head and it pulls towards the center, right? And that's what we do there. Now, there's going to be a different capacity for all of these rods in different types of muscles. So one of the things that we didn't talk about when we talked about the muscular system the other day, is we didn't talk about the different muscle fiber types, okay? So you are going to have two major categories of muscle fibers. You are either going to have slow twitch muscle fibers, or you are going to have fast twitch muscle fibers. So slow twitch muscle fibers are the muscle fibers that are associated with endurance, right? So they have a lot of blood flow. They have a lot of more blood vessels that run through them. They have a lot more mitochondria, which uses oxygen to produce energy. They have a lot more myoglobin and hemoglobin, which carry that oxygen around. And because of all of that energy production, because they're able to produce energy very easily, they tend to be a lot smaller in size. They don't have as many myofibrils. They don't have as many of those contractile proteins that we've been talking about. And so because of that, they're very slow to fatigue because they're good at spitting out energy, but they're not very good at producing high levels of force. So these are usually what you think of when you think of like your cardio muscles. These are the muscles that you think of like when you think of endurance or stabilization, right? All the muscles that are keeping you upright right now are slow twitch type 1 muscle fibers. All the muscles in my jaw that have been yammering on all day this morning, right? Those are all slow twitch muscle fibers. Now, the opposite of that are your fast twitch muscle fibers. Your fast twitch muscle fibers, they don't have as much blood flow. You know, they don't have as much mitochondria because, well, with less blood flow comes less oxygen. With less oxygen, you don't need mitochondria. And therefore, we have less myoglobin as well. So they produce energy in the fluid of the cells. So what do they have? They have way more fluid in their cell. That puffs up the cell, making it much larger. And then also there's going to be more proteins within that cell, puffing it up even bigger, making it even larger, right? So these produce a lot of force, but they are very quick to fatigue. They often cannot handle as many repetitions or as much time under tension. So these are your short-term power type muscle fibers, right? And we're going to divide that into two different categories. You'll have the true, like really, really, really explosive, heavy, strong muscle fibers. We call those your type 2X muscle fibers. And then we have, those are like true fast twitch. And then we'll have type 2A, which are like semi-fast twitch. They're like really strong, but they also like sometimes, they also just a little bit have a little bit of endurance, right? Not a crazy amount, but some. So think of like type 2A as like semi-slow twitch, but they're still very much like a type 2 muscle fiber. And then think of type 2X as like truly like explosive, right? So that's like the difference. Type 2A would be like a bodybuilder or like an athlete. And then like type 2X would be like a strong man or a power lifter. And then we got to remember how we label our muscles. Remember this from the other day, right? We've got the main muscle for a job. We call that the prime mover or the agonist, right? The agonist is the prime mover for whatever job it is you're describing. If you're talking about like hip extension, for instance, like doing a squat, right? Then your gluteus maximus is the agonist. You talk about like the assisting muscles that kind of help that agonist, that help that prime mover. That's your synergist, right? Like the hamstrings kind of help you whenever you're squatting, but the glutes are the main muscle. And then you've got stabilizers, which are there to kind of hold the whole area in place and ensure that like everything is working the way it's supposed to. Stabilizers hold the synergist and the agonist in the proper alignment. So like your core muscles while you're squatting are keeping your spine in alignment. And then you got antagonists on the other side of the joint doing exactly the opposite thing. Their job is to relax when your agonist is contracting. So they work opposite of a prime mover. So antagonists work opposite of the prime mover. So for instance, like your hip flexors, hip flexion is exactly the opposite of hip extension. So like your hip flexors are supposed to relax when you're you're squatting, right? So if I do like a leg extension, not tendonitis. If I do like a leg extension, my quadriceps are the agonist. Why does it keep going to 7? God, that's annoying. Right? Or the prime mover, if you want to call it that. The hamstring on the other side of the joint is an antagonist. So that's there to act as an antagonist. And then this is kind of an isolation movement, so there isn't really a synergist here. But we can kind of say that the hip flexors are a little bit of a synergist. So we'll go up to the hip and we'll say that that's a synergist. And then you might have like a sartorius muscle or like a little stabilizer in the knee that is just a stabilizer, right? And that's there kind of holding the whole thing in place. So the hamstrings are an antagonist, the quadriceps are an agonist, and then you've got like little synergists. So if this were a squat though, right? If we flip this around and look at the squat, sort of copy the same thing here. We've got the gluteus maximus. We got the gluteus maximus is your agonist or your prime mover. You have got the quadriceps, which are now a synergist. They're a helper muscle. You've got your core acting as stabilizers. And you've got your hip flexors right up here acting as antagonists. And so those are the sort of four major categories, right? Every muscle in the body has an antagonist. It has to. Antagonists have to relax whenever your agonist is contracting. But if they don't relax, that's what screws up our posture. We talked about muscles being overactive, a muscle spindle saying, hey, I can't stretch any further. Well, that means that muscle is not going to want to relax. It's just going to want to stay contracted. If that happens, then some other muscle is going to have to give. Maybe the agonist loses strength because it can't contract in the opposite direction anymore. So then that alters our posture because now a synergist muscle might take over, right? And that is going to move our skeletal system in a way that it's not supposed to, because usually when a synergist is helping, it's going to do what it's really good at, which is not exactly the same as the job for the muscle that you were using. So that is muscles in a nutshell. Any questions on that, guys? Questions, comments, concerns about our terminology or anything like that? Doesn't seem like it. Okay, let's do the endocrine system. So hormones, right? Endocrine system is a series of glands that are secreting hormones, and those hormones are having some type of effect on the body. So they usually consist of like a host organ that kind of is just a place for the gland to live. The hormones themselves, which are chemical messengers, and then target cells inside the body where those chemical messengers interact with. So their job is to regulate body functions, right? Your growth, your metabolism, stress, things like that. So here's some of the major ones. You've got your pituitary gland. That's the master gland that is responsible for releasing the hormones that oftentimes will kick off other hormones to do their job. So like, for instance, the pituitary gland releases thyroid stimulating hormone. And so that'll travel down to the thyroid and tell the thyroid to start producing thyroid hormone. So your thyroid hormone, your thyroid glands, their job is to help regulate metabolism and your metabolic rate. So if you have a slow metabolism, that could be because you have a slow thyroid. If you have a fast metabolism, well, you probably have a lot of thyroid. You've got your adrenal glands that live on top of your kidneys there. They release things like adrenaline and cortisol. That's really important for stress. You have got your testes, which are responsible for producing testosterone. You've got your ovaries, which are responsible for producing estrogen. Both of those are sex hormones that give us our sex characteristics, but also are responsible for the growth of certain types of tissue. You've got your pancreas, which is probably one of the biggest ones that we talk about. It's responsible for producing insulin, which pulls sugar out of your blood, or glucagon, which releases that sugar back into your blood. Because when insulin pulls it out of your blood, it stores it for later, either as fat or more likely as glycogen. You've got epinephrine, which is a version of adrenaline. Its job is to speed up your heart rate, epinephrine actually targets or releases glucagon. So it actually makes you raise your blood sugar levels. It also opens up your airways. That's why people will keep EpiPens on. I just heard this story last night on Instagram, and I don't know if this is true, but I gotta look it up. Vince Carter used to keep an EpiPen in his pocket in every game that he ever played in the NBA. And it wasn't because he had an allergy. Apparently he knew somebody who had an allergy to nuts. They had like a nut allergy. So if he was always worried if anybody ever like had their airway like close up, he would always have an EpiPen on him at all times. So he could like inject them with adrenaline or epinephrine, which opens up your airways. And I was like, all right, Vince Carter, that's kind of cool. But yeah. So, those are stress hormones. Those are the hormones that we create when we start exercising. And that's what gets us through our workout. So we get testosterone. Testosterone, men produce about 10 times as much testosterone as women. And it's about 50 times as anabolic for muscle growth. Women produce estrogen, which is very good. And men produce estrogen as well. We just produce very small levels of it. But that is also responsible for muscle growth. Cortisol, that is a very catabolic agent. Cortisol actually slows down your metabolism and causes the breakdown of tissue inside the body. So the loss of muscle, usually due to cortisol production. We got growth hormone, which is, helps us grow bone and muscle and glands and everything in our body. And then, like I said, thyroid helps us regulate our metabolism. So exercise has a major effect on pretty much all of these, right? It creates thyroid. Exercise speeds up our metabolism. It creates growth hormone. It speeds up our growth. It produces testosterone and estrogen, which speeds up muscle growth. But exercise also produces cortisol, which is a very catabolic hormone, which undoes a lot of all of that growth. So it's one of the reasons why we don't want to overtrain. When we do too much exercise, it actually, results in the overproduction of cortisol. Talk to any professional athlete in the world. They'll tell you about how hard it is to work out and exercise and stuff. But the number one thing that they will talk about managing is rest. That is like the biggest thing that they'll end up like spending their time like focusing on. It's easy to work hard, honestly. As long as you have enough willpower, and if you're getting paid professionally as an athlete, it's not that hard, It's hard to take the time off and rest and recover. That's the tough part. It's a balancing act, So we summarized everything up today, right? We got the three components of the kinetic chain. That's our nervous system, it's our muscular system, it's our skeletal system. Your nervous system is providing the communication network. It's recruiting your muscular system to generate all the internal tension, to manipulate the final system, which is your skeletal system, giving you the framework. Phew! So we just did 3 days of PowerPoints in one day. Hopefully you're all feeling like you got a second dose of everything. Hopefully helped a couple concepts sink in a little bit more. We are going to meet up on Monday. So you got a good week. You get the whole weekend to kind of process all this, finish up your homeworks. 1 and 2 this weekend. If you haven't gotten them done already, please knock those out this weekend because they are going to help you on Monday when we assign your test, right? Our first test is going to go out. It's going to cover days 1 through 5, all of the topics that we've talked about for the last 5 days. So we did a little bit of a review today. There will be a review video up on Monday on Canvas so that you guys can take that test and that homework. But we're going to meet on Monday and sort of put some of these concepts to the test. We're going to start talking a little bit about like how to program for these exercises and really put them all together and stuff. But other than that, oh, what's that, Alexa?
I did have a question. What book was that we needed?
So,
I mean, that we were going by chapter
so that's
5.
a little bit. We're actually using 2 books simultaneously in this class.
No, that's cool. I'm just talking about for the last couple of days or today, that the one that
So
you.
just today, chapter 5. It's the book of the girl doing the kneeling chest press with the cable machine. She's this one right here. Oh, good. It's this one. So read chapter 5 of this, and that will summarize all the stuff you need.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, let me